Hello, everyone. I'm here to present to you my literacy journey. I call it a journey because it definitely had a lot of twists and turns throughout my young childhood. And I decided to do it in the form of a Prezi simply because I have never used Prezi before and I've heard about it for probably 10 years now. So bear with me a little bit. um, there might be some kinks, but I thought this was a really good opportunity opportunity for me to try this. And I'm not gonna lie, I do not really enjoy making posters all that much. So this was a uh, good way for me to go, good route for me to go down. So we'll begin, and I'll start with age 4 to 7. And these were the two books I could pull out of that I knew main characters from and could kind of connect them to things that we talked about in class. The first was The Cat in the Hat. I actually came across this online where it depicted the Cat in the Hat as part of a blackface representation, which I thought was really interesting. I read up into it a little bit more, which I kind of seen where racism would be impacted into a young child's mind, but still kind of had to go out a little bit on a limb to think that this would make a huge impact on me. But then moving into a book like The Magic Treehouse, I thought it was really interesting when I did a character, when we did the character analysis through this. I could remember sort of, but not entirely, that about Jack and Annie, and it kind of led to that Jack was the one always solving all of the problems, whereas Annie was more of the one getting into trouble, always caring about people, and I could see from a young age where this would start to make an impact on myself as a young individual. All right, here we go. So now we're going to go into 7 to 10 range. I think you'll notice the guy holding the fish. This was an age where I started to really get into the outdoors and watch a lot of fishing shows. That's Bill Dance, if anybody knows who that is. And I think this is where I mostly started to see a lack of representation. For instance, in the fishing community, there were no minorities or women at this time. So I kind of could have instilled in me the feeling that, if you were a man, then you had to fish, and it was only a men's thing to do. I also saw in other things like video games, where you can see in Mario, all the women are primarily princesses. Just little subtle things like this. And then I also added Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Harry Potter, simply because Harry Potter was led by a male character. And then Charlie and the Chocolate Factory kind of represented um, classism, I guess I would say, when you're talking about for a young person. This was probably the first area where I saw this. But at this point, I kind of realized the lack of representation of women and minorities and the LGBTQ community. Moving on, this is me becoming a teen. At this age is, I feel like my this was like where my literacy was at a peak as far as reading. This is when I started to read a lot of biographies and nonfiction text. When I was speaking with my dad during the personal literacy project, where we had to talk to our families, he said this is the time where I wanted to read every biography of every president and every coach. But I think what's interesting is when I thought about that, it was always white men that I was reading about, and I didn't even know it, but they were all in figures of authority of these people that I were reading about, and the only people that were represented were white males. All right. Now moving into 14 to 16, and I'm not gonna lie, this is where my reading especially slowed down for a while. I was much more concentrated on what I would call the little things. I was not as into reading, but I started watching shows like Jersey Shore and The Bachelor, and this is where media started to create this experience for me that had a lot of sexism in it. And it also provided racism. I can remember watching The Bachelor and having several times like different like racist being like things being said in the show or having no representation at all. I also read during this time period the Lord of the Rings series, which I went back and I was like, was there anyone besides white men or princesses, or what were the women perceived like? And during this, there was no minorities, and the women very rarely were seen as any kind of like strength, symbols of strength or anything like that. So my takeaways from my literacy experience were pretty much that there was very to little to no representation. Um, it was a lot of little subtle messages sent to me throughout that I think built a worse complete picture. So I asked myself, how can I change the system? And I think just having a great set of texts that can um, represent everyone is the direction that I could go. And I really love this quote by John Dewey that says, if we teach today as we taught yesterday, we rob our children of tomorrow. And this really spoke to me throughout the literacy project and kind of to cap off this whole entire class. So yeah, that's it. Thank you. Thanks everybody. It's been a wonderful semester and have a good summer.